Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today's conversation connects directly to something that we're all talking about right now: where great content actually comes from, how to plan it, and how to write captions that connect. One of the biggest misconceptions in social is this idea that we start with a blank page. But in reality, great content usually comes from paying attention to what is already happening around us. I'm especially excited to explore this with John Schumacher. He's the director of interactive marketing at Station Casinos. Before that, he worked for several Las Vegas agencies in social media, including at the Hard Rock Hotel, which is now Virgin. John, tell us more about your background, where you went to school, and what you thought you'd do in your career, and how that shaped your path.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jen, for having me. Yeah, my name is John Schumacher. I grew up in the Chicago area. I went to school at Southern Illinois University in Carbondale. I wouldn't blame you if you haven't heard of it, but I met somebody in public relations my freshman year of college. Going into college, I didn't know what I was going to do, but that sounded interesting. And so at that time, that school kind of blended public relations, marketing, and advertising. And so I started to go down that path, taking classes, got involved in PRSSA, American Marketing Association, things like that, and really loved that space in general. After school, I came here in Las Vegas. So an internship opportunity presented itself from an alumni of SIU who lived in Vegas. I took a chance and, was supposed to be a 4-month thing. And right before I decided that I was going to move back to Chicago, a entry level social media position at Hard Rock Hotel had opened up. And this was like 2012. So like social media was very like still in its infancy, I guess, the Facebook days. So after that, a couple of years, I've bounced around to a few different agencies in the hotel hospitality space since about 2017, I believe. I've been with Station Casinos. Been incredible projects at the company that I've been a part of. Opening of Durango Resort, so many other things. But that's where I'm at, approaching about 10 years for Station Casinos, and I continue to be happy here. It's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And I was also a PR major. So I do feel like that was a pipeline for a lot of
Nice.
us in
Yes.
college to get into social before it was actually a major, like many of my students are majoring in now. So very relatable. I'm also a Midwest girl. So there you go.
There we go.
All right. So in class this week, we're talking about how most content actually comes from a few repeatable places. Even though when we're watching brands' content, sometimes it can seem random what they're talking about. Most of us do have processes behind the content that we're creating. So these repeatable places are things like what the audience is already talking about, what our brands are doing, what the internet is talking about, and what the data is telling us. So instead of creating from nothing, great communicators are really translating the world around them into content. So we have to stop thinking of it as finding content and more like sitting in front of a blank Google Doc. And our job as a social strategist is to pay attention and translate what's already happening to help us create that content. So, John, a question for you. How do you notice what the internet is talking about and turn that into meaningful storytelling?
Yeah, so for context, our team is comprised of a few social media managers that myself and a vice president manage. So we are in constant communication with one another. It sounds informal, but we have a group chat that kind of is just made for dropping ideas. Hey, we've seen a trending story or a video that is popping off that we might be able to apply to our business. Just goofy ideas. There's no wrong answers, but as simple as a group chat is how we kind of all stay in the loop from our different algorithms. I follow thought leaders in the space, whether it be marketing podcasts, YouTube videos, things like that. Just if I have kind of go-to professional resources, just a few that I check in with regularly, that works for me. I'll drop a little bit of a hack for some people that might be listening that I've done is my algorithm has a bunch of different things that have nothing to do with my work. And so a tip is to create a separate Instagram account or Twitter, Facebook, whatever it might be, that has your interests, your niche, your verticals, and start following those types of content in that separate account. I found that, in between all the friends and baby pictures on my personal account, I can go to that account and see, the latest TikTok or YouTube short or something along those lines from marketing thought leaders. I'm in the hospitality and gaming space, obviously. So kind of those thought leaders around the world, the top hotels in the world getting ideas. So it kind of helps to separate that church and state from your personal account because, I can get caught up scrolling accounts all day and it's not work, but it kind of is a version of work if I have my own algorithm dedicated to my own niche and my vertical.
That's a great point that creating great content comes from consuming social media content. And we do have to think about that as being part of our job. It's one of the more fun parts. that we really have to keep an open eye and see what is out there in our own feeds. Because if you're scrolling your feed and you start to see something more than one time, that should trip something in your brain to say, hey, what's happening here that I should pay attention to? Is it a sound? Is it a trend? Is it something that people are just generally talking about? And try to put that together from there and how it might be relatable to your brand. Have you ever seen something small turn into a powerful story from that kind of research?
Um, yeah, I also I'm putting on my public relations hat because I haven't done truly public relations, since right out of college. But my boss, my mentor, even is a vice president of public relations here at Station Casinos, and so he always says, I steal this line from him: if we don't make it feel like a big deal, then it won't be perceived as a big deal. So really, anything we do, big or small, it's we try to turn it into a powerful story. It doesn't sound small, but I'm thinking of a very recent example is Red Rock. We've created a piece of content about the private movie booths that we offer at the Regal theaters here, and it's something that the team members, boots on the ground, not really thinking about social media. It's not really a big deal, but to other people, it is a big deal. You can go and get a charcuterie board, rent out the movie theater, have a private event essentially in these spaces that we have. We did kind of a walkthrough tour and made it seem like a big deal, and now the inquiries are. I think the inbox is completely full from our group sales team. So like, I guess I'll say, obviously, some people don't have luxury movie theaters for them to work with for their brands, but if you don't make something feel like a big deal, it won't be perceived as a big deal. So even if you think, your boss or even yourself, if you think it's something small, make it feel important and special with your content.
Wow, John, that is so amazing. That is truly the best feeling working in social media is when you do content and it actually works in real life and you can actually feel the impact of it, which is like selling those out. I mean, that's amazing. So hats off to your team on that. That's the best feeling.
Thank
Um,
you. Yeah, they they're a little overwhelmed, but that's a good problem to have, right?
you're like, okay, like you asked us to help you and we rose to the occasion. When you're looking at stuff and talking to the team, like what are you guys considering about trends that might work, content that might work, and other ideas maybe that don't make it out of the production stage?
Yeah, so I think we insert ourselves into conversations that are happening on social. So it's the constant listening. Again, it's like it's the smart listening versus just kind of scrolling to scroll, but trying to find opportunities for ourselves that are a fit for jumping into conversations versus just, hey, this is the new silly sound that's trending right now. Of course, those work as, we almost call them kind of throwaway posts, which, if they hit, they hit. But there really has to be some sort of alignment. And I think people are getting more and more savvy to the fact that, I don't know. Those are a little bit more of a low hanging fruit where we try to do something a little bit bigger. And if a trend is happening, if something is a cultural moment, for example, we will try to tie it into our business as best as possible. And at the end of the day, with social and a lot of the brand plays, is we are never really thinking of it as selling to people. We're telling a story, a narrative, and how that ties into the kind of greater conversation that's happening.
Yeah, those are great points. And I think this ties nicely into really transforming our brains from being social media users into being social media marketers. Because as a social media user, some of the things or trends that you would do just to get visibility just don't make sense for the brand or aren't a good look for the brand. So there are some important things that we can think through when it comes to what might be relevant for our brand. And some of those things are, does this trend fit our audience? Does it fit our voice? And can it connect to a real content goal or pillar? Like, can there be something tangible behind why we're doing this content? So, like, yeah, we're going to be fun and trendy, but it's actually tying back to a real business goal, like you mentioned, like with the movie theater. So, I think that there's always a way to do that, but those are some important questions that we can ask because strategy ultimately matters more than just going viral.
Yes.
We also talk about, we can also think through things that might impact what people are talking about online. And those things could be events. So those could be like local events, like here in Vegas, that might be F1. Like when the Super Bowl was here a few years ago, obviously that was a major event for Las Vegas. So being mindful of what's happening in our area or in our industry. Of course, holidays. Now, we don't want to be talking about every national holiday around there, but there are some that are very notable and do capture the public's attention and the investment of brands. Women's History Month is a really good example of that one that happens every March on where brands are doing a lot of content around that. So just being aware of that. Launches that your brand might have. So whether that's a new product or something happened in your industry, those are things that you can lean into. Awareness moments and other news that's happening that might be impacting your brand, might be impacting your community, or, if you're for a local brand or in a certain geographic area, could be something happening with that. Some of my favorite places to look to know what the internet is talking about are places like Google Trends. One of my absolute favorites. You can go to trends.google.com. And for anyone listening, I'll dive into this a little bit more in my lecture notes. But that's a really awesome place. You can actually search locally, you can do nationally, internationally to get a real quick synopsis of what the internet is Googling. Because, of course, Google isn't a social media platform, but it is connected to what we're all talking about online. When we see something online, we're going to Google it to get more information. So there is some connection there based on what people are talking about. I also love Google and the people also ask. So if you Google something and you scroll down a little ways past the AI summaries, you'll see the other questions that people might be asking around that topic. And as a user, of course, that can be helpful. But from a brand perspective, it can help you get into the mind of the consumer for free to kind of understand what searches might be related to your brand. I also love the comment sections around brands, social media accounts, and competitors, especially that can be really, really helpful. You kind of laughed on. That's a relatable one that I feel like a lot of us can really find a lot of like social media gold in there to do content around. Um, you can, of course, keep
Yes.
an eye on your competitors and what they're talking about. Twitter, TikTok search, YouTube search, those can be really important places. And another one that I really like is called Keyword Sheeter. And this is a really helpful one. It actually summarizes, if you put a topic in there, it'll summarize the searches that are happening around that keyword. And it'll give you a lot of info, but it can also help you try to figure out maybe some different topics that you could explore under something for inspiration. So, John, question for you. What is a recent trend that your brand did and it performed well? And I'll also add to that, based on what I said, the best places to look for content are where's your favorite place to look for content?
Well, now I've got to look at keywordsheeter.com. That's interesting. I do Google Trends and with competitors. Obviously, we work in the Las Vegas hospitality space, so both local and out of town audiences, people who are consuming Vegas content, and obviously what my competition is putting out there. We want to make sure that we're kind of on the cutting edge and trying new things. And our ownership, thankfully, makes our job very easy because they are very interested in being first to market with different ideas, kind of pushing the envelope and kind of maybe ruffling feathers every once in a while. So it's a lot of fun because it's not we have permission to not really be stale, and so not to rag on other competitors and things like that, but watching them and just seeing how can we do something better, how can we do something that they might be talking about that we can also talk about. So I like your note about competitors and that type of thing, but also I don't particularly like to just pigeonhole myself and our team into looking for inspiration within our niches as well. Whatever it might be, if you're in the food and beverage space, if you're in the live entertainment space, the best ideas I'll often come from other industries and applying those to your business. So if there's a trend happening that you see on your feed, don't feel like you can't maybe find a way to explore it because it's not necessarily in your vertical or what your business does. Inspiration can really come from anywhere, but yeah, I think for you said recent trend that our brand did that maybe performed pretty well.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I think I mean, trend, I would more so like we talked about earlier. I think we're doing less and less of call it maybe, a lip sync trending sound voiceovers. Like those are for comedic effect, and I think for kind of little hits here and there, they are funny and they're engaging, and sometimes they do well for our brand. But I'm thinking of trend as more as like cultural relevance, like you mentioned, holidays, at the time of this recording, coming off of the Super Bowl a few weeks ago with Bad Bunny, that example came to mind. We have our social team out in the field on Super Bowl Sunday. Obviously, Bad Bunny was a large cultural moment surrounding that entire event. And so we wanted to prioritize not just the football game, but getting content out around that. And so we put out a bunch of stuff around that. And we just checked a couple days ago that one of the Durango Resort Facebook videos got 1.6 million views on Facebook and 80,000 likes or so. And that's just being a part of the being boots on the ground, being present for an opportunity to capture content, and then tying that into the kind of cultural relevance that we're talking about, the trends. So I don't know. I think it's just people can tell when brands are kind of operating in a bubble. It would feel weird on Super Bowl Sunday and Bad Bunny performing to post something that didn't have to do with that. So it's being kind of in tune with the larger conversation, and that's when you hit some home runs.
Yeah, just feels way more authentic on the platform. I totally agree. On that
Yes.
note, have you ever shared something that felt spontaneous or small that ended up resonating more than something that you carefully planned?
I'd say all the time. I don't want to jump to that because that doesn't give you an excuse not to plan. I think you can plan for the spontaneity, if that makes sense. Like, I think for an easy one that's not so much planned, I'll start with that, is like comments. Comments on Twitter, on X, comments on TikTok. Some of students might see a comment can have 100,000 likes, more so than a post itself. It feels like. So we're trying to explore that more and that's just, we still have to get some form of approval. We workshop those, but if there is somebody talking about Station Casino's brand, you better bet that we're going to try to jump in the comments and do some, maybe a witty response, or obviously do some repair work if they didn't have a good experience at our properties. And that's almost as good as a post. If a post is going viral and we're the top comment under that post, people are seeing that we are listening. And so that's been really successful for us. And that's a little bit more on the spontaneous side, like you're talking about. But I would also say plan for the spontaneous moments. So, for example, in our business, gambling and gaming is a major part of what we do, of course. So we are kind of planning these moments on our casino floors. Some folks might know if you win a slot machine over a certain threshold, it's called a hand pay jackpot. So our slot attendants run over, get them to sign a form, and give them their cash, and everybody's happy. So we kind of have been an example of spontaneous content that's perceived as spontaneous is, Stacy on our team will follow around the slot attendant, say, come here, we're doing a slot pay. You've got to follow us. We're giving somebody some money. And so it feels spontaneous, but there has to be planning involved on the back end of things. And so I think the sweet spot is if you actually plan something really well to make it feel like it's authentic and spontaneous. You don't want to be inauthentic, of course, but there are those moments that can really pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think people that haven't ran brand social may wonder when it comes to engaging in the comment section, which can truly pay off in terms of engagements and just overall impressions for your account. How do you stay on top of content that you should maybe engage in the comment section is? Because a lot of times now it isn't our own content, it's content that we're seeing elsewhere online.
Yeah, there's some listening tools. Like we use Sprout Social, for example. I know that's one of the more popular ones that have kind of listening. It's obviously people who are at mentioning us, with those come right to our inbox. But I mean, the TikTok algorithm is getting so good that within some of our accounts, like I was talking about earlier, if we're just engaging with Vegas content, a lot of that stuff will just pop up for us now. But I mean, searching keywords in the search bars, doing that sort of thing is a good way to kind of track things down. We share with each other, or if somebody, a friend will sometimes send something to me and say, did you see this? So there's a combination of being strategic and doing some keyword searches yourself, but setting yourself up to have some of that come to you is kind of like the two-tiered approach that we do.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And shout out to all the friends that are brand warriors for those of us that work for big brands. And they help keep an eye out because I get those too. And they're the best because we just all see different things online. Um,
Yes,
so,
help a friend out.
yeah, for sure. Talking about the comment section and just in general what users are doing online, I think we also need to remember that we can use this user generated content as research. And not just by reposting, but listening to specifically what people are filming themselves. What are they tagging your brand in? You talked about those slot moments, different moments in the hotels. What are people regularly doing content about? Like we can take things from that from a brand perspective to help let us know what might hit with our audience. And we also need to take mind of how they talk about a specific topic. If they're positive about something, negative about something, kind of having an idea of how our audience might react to that and what angles we might be missing as the creators that our fans are seeing. when they're boots on the ground in some of our areas. And it's really about that humility and curiosity as social media people to make sure that we're keeping an open eye when we're seeing other content to try to figure out if there's things that we can take away that can make our content better. So, John, question for you. How can we listen to understand what stories actually matter to our communities?
Yeah, I think on top of just the tools and keyword searches and things like that, like we have a extreme pulse, I believe, in Las Vegas when it comes to our business at Station Casinos. Again, my boss is public relations, and he is on top of everything that's happening in the city. But I mean, I'm assuming most of your students are local or familiar with the the Las Vegas narratives that have been bubbling up in the last, call it, 18 months or so. Is that charging for parking on the strip, or Vegas is getting too expensive. Some of these stories that have gone national, it's almost hard to ignore. So our business, fortunately or unfortunately, that feedback is loud and proud. So I mean, I think we're fortunate to have operators who have kind of zagged when everybody else is zigging, because the narrative that everything is too expensive, if it's in your niche, if a bunch of other stuff is too expensive but you can't do anything about it, that makes it a little bit more difficult. But we've reacted as a business, offering, we forever offered free parking, $1.99 margaritas, 5.99 cafe burgers, some of these things that thankfully ownership has given us to market, and we have hammered it home. So I think you need to that's an example of being good at just a few different things and really just hammering home. Station Casinos is known for the 1.99 margaritas, for example. They know, 5.99 burgers, $3 beers, some of these very simplified messages that on social, obviously they go over extremely well. Twofold. One is that it counters a lot of the, Vegas is expensive narrative. And it's easy messaging that cuts through versus 20 different messages. So we've listened to the narrative about our business. We reacted, fortunately, and then it's just on social. How do you make that fun? How do you make that cut through, and just hammer that point home?
Yeah, those are great points. So, in talking through all the things we've talked about, let's shift into content calendars, which people often think sound boring, but they can be really helpful for a brand. So, when we talk about a content calendar, this varies depending on what brand, how big or small you might work for, but it's just generally like a calendar, like a plan. What are we talking about today? What are we talking about this week? What are we talking about this month? And just kind of having some general ideas to help you with content creation can really, really be a supportive measure in social as long as you're giving yourself enough flexibility. So, some core reasons that content calendars can be helpful are consistency. It just helps you, if you kind of know what you're going to be talking about in a week or whatever, to be consistent and actually posting, helps you be organized. It can help reduce stress, and it can also help build audience trust because we're more reliably posting if we have a general plan with flexibility based on what our brands are going to be talking about. And one of my favorite reminders that I can never mention too many times, which is I love scheduling content. John mentioned Sprout Social, Hootsuite. These are different tools that brands might use to schedule content, but never set and forget it. Meaning, don't be scheduling stuff and then letting it go out without being aware of what's happening in the world. John, earlier you said it would be weird during the Super Bowl if you guys were talking about something un-Super Bowl related. And this can be a really great example of that, where brands really, really get burned if they have content going out that doesn't jive or make sense with what their audience is talking about. And
Oh yeah.
ultimately, real connection just still happens in real time. Like, we need to be mindful of that. So we can schedule stuff, but just be reading the room and knowing what our audience is talking about when that's going up. So, John, question for you. In content, how can we balance planning with very human emotional moments?
Yeah, so I think planning is extremely important. I think, like we said, you can plan for the spontaneity, plan for the human moments. I'll give a sneak peek example for Station Casinos, celebrating our 50th anniversary in July. July is how many months? 3, 4 months away now. It seems like it'll be here tomorrow, but still kind of far away, right? Like, we have things that are happening now that will create those human moments and have them ready for the 50th anniversary in July. Again, kind of inside baseball, we have all team member meetings where our GMs go up and kind of tell everybody the state of their properties and all the exciting stuff that's happening. And they will be teasing the 50th anniversary. And that will, that's the only point where we'll have all of our team members all together at one point. So we're like, we need to strike while the iron's hot. So we are going to be setting up moments for these team members to tell their stories. Some of these team members have been here literally since 50 years ago. We have some like literally day one team members at Palace Station, which was like the original locals casino. So we are planning for to kind of pull those stories out of them and get those human moments. But they don't just happen in a bubble, right? So there needs to be planning involved in them, kind of leading them with questions, scheduling. All of that goes into it, because if you just show up and stick a camera in somebody's face and say, tell me a heartwarming story, it's not going to work out, as we know.
Yes, we all have those fun horror stories to think back on. So, if you want
Yes.
to help everyone understand, what would you say is an ideal balance on planning versus spontaneity when it comes to content? Are you like an
Yeah,
80?
I would go, I mean, I would do like an 80-20 planning versus spontaneity. I think always leave the window open for spontaneity. Plans change. You need to be willing to pivot. You need to be able to read the room. If something unfortunate is happening in our world that maybe we should lay low for a while. There's obviously, there's questions that in our specific vertical as a casino that we want to be sure that we are sensitive about. So if there's something else going on, that maybe we lay low for a while, and then we can kind of be fun and structured when there's things that make sense for our brand to jump into. So it's 80% planning. It's always, the something is not going to magically come up very often, and so I think the window is always open. And if something is trending on a certain day and you plan to post a photo of something that has nothing to do with that, save it for the next day, or be nimble and be willing to pivot based on what will be successful.
I agree. And I find that the plan content is pretty evergreen, meaning it can go at any time. So that's one of the best things is put effort into planning and know that you can usually move it if something trending comes up and take advantage of that. And then you have more content for the next day,
100%.
next week, or whatever it is.
Your future self will thank you, I think, if
Yes,
you have that anyway.
I love that. All right, let's talk about another thing that's really important that I think we don't talk about enough, which is caption writing. And there is actually a really simple but powerful formula that I always like to bring everyone's attention to. And this is how the caption should actually be structured, which is you should start with a hook, which is your attention grabbing opening. Then you should give context, which is a brief explanation of whatever you're doing. And then, most importantly, a call to action, promoting engagement, asking a question, encouraging a comment, click off to a website, whatever it is. But combining those three things together can be really, really vital. And it doesn't have to be really long. And in fact, it probably shouldn't. As we know, most platforms are now only previewing 1 to 2 lines, maybe three max, before they're going to bury your content in the see more. And only 10 to 20% of people actually do click that see more. But it's also important to remember that even if they don't click see more, I do think that there is a lot of connectivity between SEO and what your caption says. So it's finding the right balance, but that formula can really serve as a guide to help make sure that you're providing a caption that does get people's attention and provide the right information. We want to craft headlines that stand out by focusing on what makes our message different. So we want to ask ourselves, what is different about this, and ensure that our headline reflects that uniqueness. We always want to, as creators and as communications people, we want to be putting ourselves in the shoes of our users and our fans and followers. And we want to be asking ourselves, why would they care about this, and make sure that we're writing for them. We want to incorporate urgency into our headlines by addressing why our message matters right now. We want to use phrases like limited time offer, act now, to prompt that immediate action. And we want to ensure that our headlines are not only unique and urgent, but also useful. We want to clearly communicate how your content will help the audience, making it ultra specific and relevant so that they understand, why are we talking about this right now? So, John, question for you. In your experience, what part of a caption is the hardest to get right? Is it that hook, the context, or the call to action?
I have to just 100% say hook. I think that's the most important. If you don't have the hook, there's a literally, they call it the endless scroll, right? There's so much stuff going on, and so from a text perspective, if you don't hook that person and they're scrolling, then you've lost them for the rest of your context and your call to action anyway. So it's tough, right? But it's the what's you got to be not selfish about your brand and flip it on the audience. And with that hook, if you're scrolling, like the what's in it for them, what's in it for me, to keep them engaged a little bit. So I'd say hook is pretty much everything, and then you work your way downhill from there.
I agree. And how do you decide what content is essential? Because more often than not, especially the longer you work for a brand, it's really easy to write a long caption because there is generally so much information that we want to convey in that post. When your caption is too long, what are some things that you're asking yourselves or helping support the team in as we shorten that text down and make it shorter?
Yeah, to your point, you were thinking about SEO, discoverability. There's some accessibility things here for certain folks, but I think there's no right or wrong answer, but I think rule of thumb is just always try to get to the point as quickly as possible. Less is more. You know, that I'm saying that as somebody who loves writing more than any other creative medium, but like just think about your own behavior, right? If you see a big block of text below an Instagram post, how often are you reading that thing word for word? I think sometimes too, these platforms are getting so smart that depending on the content, if it's a talking head, if I'm talking to the camera on TikTok, that the captions can actually do some of the heavy lifting in the SEO. So not only the copywriting for the body of the post, but I would say the copywriting for the actual video cannot be understated, because that can almost be 90% of your SEO, and you have a short and sweet caption and it kind of does the heavy lifting for you, like I said. So yeah, I would think there's no right or wrong answer. Sometimes you need to put a lot of information in there because of constraints or whatever. But the rule of thumb, always try to get to the point as quickly as possible. You and I and everybody else only have 24 hours in a day.
Yep, great point. All right, let's play a fun game of this or that content edition. So, one powerful story or 10 quick updates. Which one would you pick?
I think I was thinking about this more and more. I'm almost leaning towards the one powerful story, and it seems like the platforms are kind of leaning that way as well. Because I guess just not to discount pumping out the content, but updates. If you just post to post, it's going to be noise, and it's almost no longer neutral anymore. It's almost a negative. If you're posting a bunch of stuff that's noise and nobody's engaging, then your next piece of content is going to be shown to less people. But I also don't want to discount if you're just starting, to be careful falling into the trap of wanting that perfect piece of content and you never actually ship something out. So sorry, that's a long non-answer. That there's a little bit of both, but I would almost go one powerful story.
Yeah, I echo that. I think for me, it would be one powerful story, and I would turn that into 10 smaller stories too, because you can get a lot of bang for your buck in that effort you put
100%.
into scripting across web and email and whatever. So, making all that work together.
Totally agree.
Listening first or creating first?
I think this one's. I would go creating 100%. Especially for maybe the audience that's listening to this, just getting into the industry, your career, do the thing, get the reps. I'm always about getting reps. Social media is all about repetitions, and then you can listen to the feedback or lack thereof of what you put out, what other people are putting out. Like, but if you get into the listening trap, then you might be procrastinating and you might not be creating at that time. So I would go create 100%. Jump in, don't be scared.
Yeah, well said. All right, user generated content or brand produced content?
I think brands should be putting a large portion of their budget into producing what you would call the user generated content, and even hiring people, like hiring people who are creators or who have that past. I don't know if this will be relevant when this airs, but like Staples Batty, for example, some people might know on TikTok,
Right, right.
who is a you've seen her, I'm sure, John, like a expert who is creating user generated content on behalf of Staples, and they've absolutely exploded in sales and demand and brand recognition. So like that's the blueprint I think right now that a lot of people are seeing is brands can produce what you would call user generated content. So I think there's kind of a both sides here.
Well said. All right, pre scheduled posts or fully real time posting?
I know you said I would go real time almost 100% of the time. And that's not to say that you are generating content in real time and then posting it right away. It's everything that we talked about, but you need to be present when you're posting. You need to be responding to comments because that can only help the post do better.
Yeah, great point. Short caption or meaningful long caption?
Short, I think, like we talked
Sure.
about,
Yeah,
is
we
is,
all have
is
sort
more
of
my take. But
for sure.
there's a window for long captions, but I think we talked about that already. I'd say short.
And guest feedback or employee stories?
If I had to pick, I would pick employee stories. And that's not discounting guest feedback at all. I think employee stories are one of the easiest ways for like a brand to get people to care about them. It's kind of a cheat code. Station casinos, it's like our secret sauce and how we set ourselves apart in the market with others is we've, 5, 6 years ago when it wasn't really uh, savvy to put our team members front and center in our content. It's done extremely well for us. But I mean, think about your own behavior. You go to a coffee shop because you like the barista. I go to a bookstore because I like the owner versus Barnes and Noble. Like it's kind of a cheat code to tell your employee stories and the humans behind your brand.
Yeah, I think that's very authentic for your brand. You guys do a great job of doing that. And we're way
Yeah,
ahead of the curve,
thanks.
as you said.
We
All right.
try.
So, in closing reflection after this wonderful conversation, I think today's big idea for students is simple. Great content isn't about being louder, it's about paying attention, planning thoughtfully, and speaking authentically. John, before we close, what's one message that you'd want future communicators, educators, or storytellers to carry with them when it comes to content creation?
Yeah, I would say with everything, with the internet price commodity where you can get the cheapest product commodity where a lot of things are blending together. And then you have AI, which is upending literally everything that we're doing right now, that a brand story is going to become everything. It already is. So I hesitate to say like being human. This is kind of a cliche, but as a storyteller, there's jobs popping up now that are more like a chief marketing officer, but it's chief storytelling officer, and it shows kind of the importance of some of these brands who are ahead of the curve and recognizing that AI can commoditize a lot of these things. It can write a caption for you. It can do some of these things, but like if you have a storyteller who can connect your brand story across your social channels, but not just that, email, website, SMS, billboards, all these different things, that's going to be more important than ever because that's kind of the arbitrage that AI hasn't figured out yet. So if you can connect the dots with your story as a brand, I think that's what is going to be most important for you to succeed as a marketer, an advertiser, storyteller, whatever you want to call it, in the next 5 to 10 years. And then beyond that, who knows? Because it's a wild world out there.
Yes, that is really great insight for everybody. Well, John, thank you so much for joining in on this conversation. It's been so awesome to just trade information and to share all of this with the students. And of course, to my students, thank you for listening. This week is all about noticing the world around you because that's where meaningful content really begins. So, John, thanks again for being here.
Thanks so much, Jen. Appreciate it.